Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Cultivate Your Mental Wealth. In this space, we talk about ways to go from places of mental illness to mental wellness, and from mental wellness to mental abundance. I call this your mental wealth. That's the zone that we should all be operating in because our wellness isn't just for us, it's for ourselves and our communities. And when we are mentally well in the overflow, we're able to give to others in the overflow. So let's get into the zone of mental wealth. My name is Joyce Ozeh. I am a Nigerian American civil rights attorney. I am a mental health advocate, and I am also someone with lived experience. I have had to navigate anxiety and depression in my personal life. I've had to figure out ways to overcome and renew my mind and get to this place of mental wealth. So I know what I'm talking about. And while I'm not a medical or healthcare professional, I am an advocate, and I'm here to guide you through so that we can do this journey together. I also want to talk about what you can expect from today's show. I've missed you all. I know I say that every single episode, but I really have missed you all. Tell me where you're tuning in from. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. Where are you tuning in from? Where are you watching from? And I love when joy is intentional. Joy isn't just what you feel because of circumstances. Joy can also be what you carefully curate and cultivate despite what you are experiencing. So, in the chat, along with where you're tuning in from, again, share with me what brings you joy. Joanna, I see you. Can you tell us what brings you joy? What brings you joy in the summertime? What are you going to be intentional about cultivating despite your circumstances and despite what you're feeling? While you all are telling where you're tuning in from and answering that joy question, I want to give you an overview of what you can expect on today's show. It's going to be a good one. As those who were tuning in at the end of June were able to see, we are talking about finding a therapist. This is going to be part 2 of the series, Finding a Therapist that works with you and how to navigate wellness with your therapist. I'll also have an audience check-in where I'm looking at the answers that are coming in. If I cannot get to your comment, please leave it anyways. Every single episode, I go back and I follow up personally to your comments. So let me know what brings you joy and where you're tuning in from. We're also going to talk about what you can expect on the next episode. And I'm going to leave you with some practical pushes towards wellness. So that is our quick overview. I see that people are already commenting and I cannot wait to get to it. But I want to say happy National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, y'all. For those of you who do not know, July is actually National Minority Mental Health Awareness. In our communities and people that look like us, we may not talk about mental health. So you just being in this space, in this virtual room, you are celebrating awareness and you are changing the narrative for Black people. You tuning in right now is so powerful. Welcome, and let's celebrate mental health awareness for our communities. Let's seek help and freedom. I also want to let you know that you should continue to email me at comethrive247@gmail.com because I read all of your emails. If you have questions about mental health, if you want to share a story about a family member who's struggling and you need to figure out ways to support them, if you want to share your journey with me, I welcome your stories. They can be shared totally anonymously. I've already followed up with a few of you. And if you want an opportunity to have your story shared on the show, be my guest. You can literally be my guest on this segment if you want to talk about your mental health journey and how you're navigating wellness for yourself. I'm so happy to have you. It can be anonymous or you can put your name to your narrative. Come Thrive 247@gmail.com. So those are our major housekeeping type topics. But before we go into the main segment, I want to go into a part of the show that I call setting the room. What does that mean? So, I come here and I talk to you about mental wellness. I share my journey. Sometimes I have guests on the show, as we did last time. But I want you to know that this is your show and this is our conversation. I want this conversation to be interactive. You are safe here. You are valued here. And I'm here to listen to you. There is no judgment on your journey. No judgment on your journey in this room. Take advantage of this space because this room is yours. And now we're family. So welcome, welcome, welcome to the Cultivate Your Mental Wealth Corner. Now that we've set the room, let's get into it because I really want to talk about finding a therapist. So the last time we spoke, I had my friend on the show who's also a civil rights attorney and a Black woman who was talking about her challenges navigating finding a therapist, getting over the stigma. We all know that still exists. It's better, but it still exists. The stigma that exists with seeking mental health help and how she was able to overcome that and get connected with services. So you may be listening or you may have watched that segment and thought, that's a wonderful story, but I don't know where to begin. This episode is for you. I want to walk us through objective ways of finding a therapist so that as we're having these conversations, you feel empowered to have and to seek the resources that you may need or that your family may need or your friend may need. Share this with someone who can benefit from how to find a therapist and where to start. It can sound overwhelming, but I promise you, there are tools out there available for you to get connected with the resources that you need. So let's walk through them. First, finding a therapist. Where do I start? How do I have that conversation? And what should I be looking for? What questions should I ask? So, as if some of you may know, or some of you may not know, there are actually many different types of therapy, tons of different types: psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, all these different types. But I want to talk about four of some of the more popular ones. And there are ways to look into each of these more specifically, but let's just do a quick overview of four of the more popular ones. And the reason I want to do this is because when you are looking for therapy, you want to ask yourself, what type of therapy do I even want? Because there's so much that's out there. One of the most popular therapies is called cognitive behavioral therapy. How many of y'all have heard of that? I've heard of that even before I started therapy, or CBT. Cognitive behavioral therapy is actually evidence-based therapy, and the goal of CBT is to help you adapt and change your mindset and behaviors by reassessing what they call maladaptive, that's a very scientific term, but maladaptive is just distorted thought patterns. So CBT wants you to adapt and change those maladaptive or distorted bad thought patterns. And the premise of this type of therapy is our thoughts control our emotions. How many of you believe that your thoughts can actually control your emotions? I am very passionate about this type of therapy specifically because I can attest to how this therapy mixed with my faith actually got me out of anxiety and depression. I'm going to say that again for some of y'all who are new on the show. If you are experiencing anxiety and depression and you're being told that there's no cure for it, sure, there's no pill that can magically take it away, but it is 100% possible for you to be free from anxiety and depression through therapy like CBT, because it is possible for you to change those thought processes that make you lean towards anxious or depressive thoughts. You don't have to be who you've always been. You don't have to always be anxious. You don't have to always be depressed. But let's move on to another form of therapy that is pretty popular, and it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And that is being able to be in the present moment with your mind and with your body in a way that allows you to be aware of what's happening in the now. That may sound like a lot of theory and a lot of jumbo, but for those of you who experience anxiety, you may be able to relate to how much anxiety makes you feel like you're not in the present or like you're out of body. And acceptance and commitment therapy works to ground you. And it also focuses on what is called psychological flexibility. And that's just being able to intentionally act in ways that are beneficial to you. So, grounding, being present, that's what acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, works to do. A third popular type of therapy is dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. What does that try to do? It wants to give people skills with the help of a therapist to regulate your emotions, improve your relationships, handle stress, and live in a way that is mindful. This happens by being able to identify what is the kind of life that you want and what does that look like for you? What are some skills that you can learn to make it happen? DBT focuses on how to create the life that you want and improve your relationships and regulate your emotions. Does that sound like it can benefit you? Look into it more. It may be able to help you. The fourth type that I want to address that is very, very popular, psychoanalytical or psychotherapy. This is also known as talk therapy. It's what you've seen probably growing up with someone laying on the couch in their therapist's office, just talking about their life. And this type of therapy is when you work with your therapist to identify aspects of your life that you need to work on the most. And it looks like talking, listening, engaging, and other forms of expression. Okay, so those is just a quick rundown and an overview of 4 types of therapy. And you can look through all of this and figure out what works best for you. But that is one of the first questions that you should consider when you're looking for a therapist. What kind of therapy do I want? Amongst those 4, there are many others. So just look into it and I'll give you resources on how to find more information at the end of the show. So stay tuned. You also want to ask yourself, what's my budget? As many of you know, therapy can be expensive, but did you know therapy doesn't have to be expensive? Did you know that you can actually seek therapy and therapeutic services for free? There are programs and some therapists that will allow you to get help for free. There's also online or virtual therapy that usually comes at a relatively lower cost than in-person sitting on the couch type of therapy. So look into that for some more budget-friendly options. Also, in-person therapy can come at a higher cost, but there are options for you. There could be your health insurance that can help you with that. There can be something that you negotiate with the therapist one-on-one. There can be payment plans. Do not let budget inhibit you from seeking the help you need, but also be aware of what you're willing to spend and invest in yourself. It's an investment in yourself because it's an investment in your mind. So think about it. The next question after budget and what type of therapy is, how do you get a referral? You should be thinking about, well, how do I even find one? You don't have to just go straight to Google. If you have a primary care physician, that's a great place to start when it comes to asking for how to get a referral to a good therapist. Also, tap your network. It could be word of mouth. There are many therapists who you can find through your friends, who your friends can vouch for. I love word of mouth type of referrals because I know that the person is legitimate. And if that person's therapist is booked, guess what? Therapists know other therapists. You can ask that therapist, okay, if you're not seeing clients as you're the way you're seeing my friend, do you know of other therapists who work in the same area you do that you can refer me to? So tap your network when you're looking for therapists. The internet might be a really overwhelming place to start. If you are a student, your university often has psychotherapy, or just therapeutic services that are included in your tuition. And it's a good place to start for referrals. If you are insured, call up your insurance company and ask them for referrals under your psychotherapy or the therapeutic part of your insurance coverage. They often have a list of people within the network. And again, friends and family, your place of worship, it's okay to tap them too. Okay, now you have a referral, you have a budget. What do you do next? You should be checking the credentials of any therapist that you find. You always want to ensure that your therapist is qualified. There are many people who call themselves counselors or who are out there giving advice without formal training and credentials. It's why I'm very, very careful to introduce myself as a mental health advocate with lived experience. I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I just work in the mental health space, and I have a lot, almost 10 years of experience with mental health work and advocacy. But make sure the person that you're going to actually psychoanalyze you has the credentials that are necessary to be effective and restorative for you. And did you also know that there are tools where you can see whether the therapist you're seeking has the credentials and the licensing they need? Stay tuned for more of those resources. You also want to ask yourself what your goals are when it comes to therapy. You don't want to go into therapy without a plan. I don't mean that you have to say, from A to B to C, this is exactly what I want my therapist to ask me. And by December, I want to have covered my daddy issues. And by next May, I want to make sure that I understand why my teen is acting the way he is. No, it doesn't have to be that specific of a plan. But if you know that you are struggling with grief, for example, or you know that you are struggling with overeating when you feel depressed, or you are feeling really anxious and it's hard for you to face your workday, know the general subject areas that you want to cover in therapy so that you feel empowered to seek the help in the way that you need the help. Now, a good therapist is going to be able to walk you through that, develop a plan, navigate the things that you need to navigate and to overcome, and understand the mental challenges that you're experiencing. But it also helps you feel empowered and you take control of the treatment that you're receiving. If you go into that treatment saying, okay, I may not have a word for this yet, but I know that I pull my hair when I'm nervous. I may not know what's happening to me, but I know that, man, it's been real hard to like open up my mail and pay the bills, or it's been real hard to clean my room lately. And I know that I want to make sure that I'm able to talk about in therapy. That's what I mean by what's your goal? Where do you want to be? What do you want to cover? Have that general outline in your mind or on paper before you start any kind of therapy or those kinds of services. Also, I want you to ask yourself, what is the cultural competence or alignment of the therapist that you're seeking? In fact, don't ask yourself, ask the therapist. What is your therapist's cultural competence or alignment with your personal beliefs or goals? If you tend to be more of a conservative person and the therapist is listing a lot of subject areas that they cover that are more liberal, be mindful of that. If you are a faith-based person, I identify as a Christian, and I wanted to be able to speak with the therapist and talk about Jesus, and that person not look at me and say, oh, you mean that make-believe guy that you guys believe died and rose from the dead? I'm not saying that in order to receive effective treatment, your therapist has to believe every single thing that you believe. What I am saying is that I knew that I wanted my therapy to be mixed in with my faith. So I wanted my therapist to be like, you know what? What you're going through sounds like Job from the Bible. And I want you to look at these verses, these verses, these verses. And I also want you to follow this cognitive behavioral plan, and we'll circle back. I wanted my science to be mixed in with my faith. And that's why it was important for me to find someone who was culturally competent and faith based so that I wouldn't feel silly sharing some things about what God is speaking to me, and so that I could have something that grounds my therapy. If you are not religious at all and you're seeking a therapist that firmly believes in God, it's something to consider. Again, that therapist, if that person is licensed, will be able to navigate it. But you just want to make sure that there's alignment and that the fit makes sense for you and what you need. So I want to reassure us as we're navigating the space, and I want to tell you there are many things that are okay. It is okay for you to pull up and ask your therapist questions about their areas of expertise, the type of therapy that they practice, what their upfront fees are, etc. You are not being too pushy. You are not asking in too much. You need to know these things up front so that you don't waste your time. Whenever I talk about finding a therapist, it reminds me of dating. And so often I have girlfriends that'll be with the guy for 6 months to a year. And towards the end, they're just getting to the difficult questions about whether you want kids, whether you're religious, what your debt is. But you've wasted all this time by not asking those questions up front. Well, guess what? Treat your therapist like you're meeting someone on a date for the first time that you want to have some type of long-term, impactful relationship with, because it really is a relationship. Ask them about their fees. Ask them about their beliefs. Ask them if they've helped and served someone who looks like you before, who is struggling with the things that you're struggling with. Know that up front so that you can navigate that relationship effectively. Also, it's okay if you date around when it comes to a therapist. In fact, expect to not have a perfect fit right away. It's okay that you have a few sessions and you're like, you know what, this isn't going to work, and you part ways. You are not married or tied to any one relationship, and you need to find the fit that works with you without shame, without feeling like you owe them something. It is okay. So I know I've talked about a lot of information and a lot of resources, but I want to make sure that you understand that there are tools available for you to navigate all of this. You are not alone. Don't let the internet be your first exposure to it. Go through this episode again and walk through the steps. And I also encourage you to find a great resource online that I actually use and I found helpful. I'm doing the hard work, so you don't have to. I loved looking at psychcentral.com. Specifically, they had an article that I incorporated into this conversation called How to Find the Right Therapist. And the reason I'm flagging that specific website, psychcentral.com, is because it also has a website link in that article that can help you kind of vet a therapist, see if they're licensed, see what their APA credentials are, which is where therapists get licensed and you can see who's licensed. So definitely browse that if you have more questions about what types of therapy and how to make sure your therapist is legit. Also, most of us watching are Black people or people of color. So, what has really helped me in finding a therapist that is culturally competent is plugging into resources like Therapy in Color. That's Therapy in Color. You can actually go online and just Google that, and it will give you a list of therapists that are people of color and have experience treating people of color. That's where that cultural competence comes in. There's also Therapy for Black Girls, which is a great resource. And there's also the National Alliance on Mental Health. They have an entire helpline. Follow up with me privately if you want the information for the National Alliance on Mental Health helpline. You can also go ahead and Google that. But what's really cool about this helpline is you can literally text the helpline for more resources. You can also send them an email for more resources. They're open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm seeing in the chat that Inclusive Therapist is also a good website. awesome, inclusive therapist. Francesca, thank you so much. And I'm also seeing Joanna, you're calling from St. Lucia. Oh my goodness, do you live there? Is that a vacation? Thank you so much for tuning in. And I love that your family, food, and sharing brings you intentional joy. Yes, on the show, we are qualifying our joy. We are not waiting for joy to happen to us. We are cultivating joy and cultivating our mental wealth and abundance so that we get to places of wellness. Reads from California. Thank you so much for tuning in. You have joy with praise and worship and helping those in need. You are a person after my own heart. That is exactly where we're going to get to later on in the show. So you must have been reading my notes, but I love those ways of cultivating joy. Angel, Blood, I love you. Thank you so much for tuning in from New Jersey. And thank you, Francesca. Oh, thank you so much for watching the segments. You are officially part of the family, and who knows, you may be a guest on the show if you so choose to share your story or share what you've learned. Make sure that you email at comethrive247@gmail.com, and we may be able to have a listener session where we feature you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And there's more, so don't go anywhere. But before I get to the more, I want to talk about what is coming up next. So the next segment will be July 25th, and we very well may have a special guest on that segment, and it's going to be a powerful wrap up to National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. So save the date, same time, same place. Also, July is Fibroids Awareness Month, and next week, July 18th, we will have multiple panel discussions on fibroids. Call all the women you know, especially the Black women, to join the discussion. And guess what? Yours truly will be hosting and moderating one of the panels, so you do not want to miss it. Okay. We are now at the part of the show that we call practical pushes towards wellness. So stay tuned as I leave you with some practical pushes. Thank you all again for joining the space and joining the conversation. Raphael, good evening. So great to see you. I want to leave you now with some practical pushes so that everything that we've been discussing can be actually implemented in your life as you go from places of wellness and wealth in your mind, in your body, and in your community. So the practical push for today is actually one that I've been practicing myself because I work on practicing what I preach to y'all because we're family, right? Be mindful of what's keeping your mind full. Be mindful of what is keeping your mind full. Today I was walking around and I was thinking, man, my spirit feels really heavy. What's been going on? What do I need to do to shift it? I don't feel like going to the office. Why do I feel heavy? And you know what I did? I decided to implement worship music in the morning. So, Reeds, you read my notes. I couldn't figure out how to get out of this funk that I was feeling. So, I started to turn on music. And what I did is I went to the playlist that I made in 2018, 2019, worship music, and I just started singing out loud before my spirit even felt it. As in, before I felt joy, I started to sing in joy. For those of you who may not be religious, pick music that kind of changes the environment, your ambience, just the mood. Jazz music can do that for you. Classical music can do that for you. The sound of rain can do that for you. If there are times that you are feeling heaviness in your spirit and you need the atmosphere to shift, do not underestimate the power of music. Do not. So, this is my practical push for you. If you're like, I don't have a playlist, Spotify has playlists that are like coffee music, ambient music, major streaming platforms have these type of playlists. Tune into them or go and explore and create your own. Either way, play music in your atmosphere and your environment and watch your environment shift and your mind shift with it. Practice this with consistency this week. I want you to thrive. I'm proud of you, and I can't wait to meet again. Go thrive.